Hello and welcome to Spirit Among Us. Ephesians chapter 2 verses 11 and 12. Therefore remember that at one time you Gentiles in the flesh, called the uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision, which is made in the flesh by hands, remember that you were at that time separated from Christ, alienated from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers to the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. So yesterday we talked about how the old law of the Israelites was fully fulfilled in Jesus Christ. He came to keep the law completely and then die so that we could enter into a new covenant with Him. One where those old rituals and ordinances are no longer required. While that old way of serving God has passed away now, we shouldn't forget about it completely. For one thing, remembering what the Jewish people had to go through to maintain their fellowship with God demonstrates to us how detrimental our sin is. And knowing this will motivate us to repent and turn away from a wrong way of living. Another benefit of remembering this old way of doing things is to recognize what our standing was before God at that time and where we would be without Jesus. Paul tells us here in Ephesians to remember that we used to be separated from Christ. He is encouraging us to think about this, to contemplate this, to remember the time in which we did not know God. Before we came to believe, we had no real understanding of God. We had no connection to God like what was available to Israel. We were cut off from the only one who gives life, separated from the God of the universe. I think what Paul wants us to recognize here is how amazing our salvation actually is. Now, we are abiding in the vine. We are attached to Jesus himself, adopted into his family, and we are being prepared as his bride. We've been blessed and have received such a marvelous salvation. But in the midst of this, we are to remember who we once were. We were detached from God. Jesus tells us a bit about this in the Gospel of John, and I want to look there now. John chapter 6, verse 53. So Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you." Without God, without Jesus, without fellowship with him and believing in him and following him, we have no life. At that time, when we were without Christ, when we were separated from him, we had no life in us. We were, as it were, dead in our trespasses and sins. We had no hope. We had nothing really to look forward to, and we were living under the wrath of God. So why does Paul tell us to remember this reality? Why would he tell us to reflect on such an awful thing? Well, I believe he wants to remind us of this so that we can see just how great it is that we have fellowship with our God. We once were separated from him, but now we have been brought near. We have been welcomed, and we have been loved more than we know. So don't be afraid to remember who you once were and what your standing once was before God. You used to be separated from Christ, cut off from the giver of life. But now, through the shedding of his own blood, he has given you new life, redeemed you, and saved you forevermore. Thank you for watching, and God bless.